Dad visits ex to see his baby, is heartbroken by what he sees. One day Dylan received a phone call from his ex which left him extremely worried and tensed. He immediately sat in his car and rushed towards a medical shop to pick up the needed medicines. His ex, Maisie, informed him that their daughter was very sick and urgently needed some medicines. After buying all that was needed, the father again sat in his car and drove to his ex's house. Dylan parked his car and ran inside the house. He saw the mother carrying the daughter in her arms and singing a lullaby to her. It was evident from Maisie's face that she too was distraught, but she did manage to greet him with a weak smile. However, as he was putting the pills away, he noticed something that crushed his heart. Dylan and Maisie were high school sweethearts and were pretty sure they were made for each other. It was as if they had found their soulmates. Both had met in law school and fell in love at first sight. They were proud to have this degree as it would in future provide financial stability for them to start a family. Without wasting any time, after graduation and dating for almost 3 years, Dylan went down on his knees and popped the question. Maisie was on top of the cloud and they both said their I do's in a traditional ceremony and were ecstatic to spend their lives together. Dylan was absolutely sure that Maisie was his soulmate since they shared the same sense of humor, interest, and hobbies, and they also rarely fought. Following the marriage, the newlywed couple went on a honeymoon and soon they got the good news. The lovely couple thought that the stars aligned when they met and fell in love. A few months later, Dylan and Maisie welcomed their beautiful daughter, Zawadi, into the world. It felt like they knew the true meaning of happiness and both saw their child as a gift, thus the name Zawadi. Children always make the family complete and fill their parents' lives with bliss and joy. Unfortunately, disasters struck soon in this family and everything fell apart and their vows came crashing down. Maisie was the only one who had pursued a career in law after completing her graduation and earning her degree. She made good use of her knowledge. However, Dylan had some other plans and wanted to follow his dreams. He always had a passion for music and suddenly after the birth of the baby decided to follow his desire. This decision didn't suit well with his better half, Maisie, as he was no longer a bachelor but a family man. Dylan had a wife and especially a baby to look after, and everybody knows it is not easy to raise a child. A lot of expense would go into buying stuff needed for raising their daughter and Maisie could not handle such pressure alone. She was worried that Dylan's decision would lead to financial problems and she would end up doing everything all by herself. This sudden decision caused ripples in their once steady relationship and both started to drift apart. Maisie voiced her concern and tried to persuade her husband to think about his family and not act selfishly. But Dylan was adamant and wanted to make a career in the music industry. Soon their fights turned nasty. He expected that his wife would support him, but she couldn't do so as there were bills to pay. Their arguments quickly escalated and they began arguing about the most trivial things. After fighting for months, the pair that had vowed to grow old together decided to go their separate lives. Both mutually agreed that it was becoming difficult to have a simple conversation, and although they loved each other, it wasn't the same as before. The passionate flame between them had completely faded out and soon Dylan and Maisie signed the divorce papers. However, the one thing that they were grateful for was their daughter Zawadi, who acted like a string that brought them together even after their separation. Even though it was a heartbreaking decision, both attempted to keep things civil because deep down they still loved and respected each other. Dylan and Maisie maintained their friendship and were constantly in touch as they had a daughter to look after. It is natural for newborn babies to fall sick, and one day Zawadi too became ill. She had come down with an awful headache and Maisie immediately called Dylan asking him to bring medicine. She was too busy carrying Zawadi in her arms and trying to comfort her to go out and get medicines for her daughter. On the other hand, Dylan quickly grabbed his car keys and drove to a medical shop. He bought the medicines that were needed and rushed to his ex's house to provide some assistance. Dylan finally reached her house and ran inside it. He saw Maisie carrying Zawadi in her arms and singing a lullaby. It was very evident from her face that she was extremely tensed but managed to welcome him with a weak smile. He dropped the medication and instantly hugged his ex and the baby and inquired about Zawadi's health. Maisie answered that she was burning up and asked Dylan if he got the needed medicines. He nodded in response and informed Maisie that he'd keep it above her refrigerator where she would be able to see it. Unaware that something unpleasant was waiting, he took out some medicine for his daughter to consume and placed the rest on top of the fridge. Dylan then opened the fridge to grab a bottle of water and that's when he saw it. When Dylan pulled open Maisie's fridge, he hadn't expected to find what he did. 2 bottles of water stood before him, one almost empty and the other half full. The rest of the fridge was empty. This broke his heart. Although they were no longer together, he wished that Maisie would share her troubles with him. Dylan has a lot of respect for Maisie and appreciated how she was handling things on her own. Maisie had been working full-time while trying to take care of Zawadi, and she also bought herself a car, which she was busy paying off. He could not have been prouder of his ex-wife, but he knew that she was under an immense amount of stress. When Dylan looked around, he noticed the shelves were stacked with baby formula stacks and all the fruits Zawadi needed. This brought a smile to his face, but he knew that Maisie needed help and he would go to any lengths to make his family happy. Dylan hurried the medicine and water to Maisie and told her he needed to handle some things in town. He then drove to a grocery store and bought enough groceries that would last for weeks. Dylan took a trunk full of groceries back to Maisie's. At first she refused to accept it but eventually gave in. A smile bloomed across her face as she hugged him and he explained that although he and Maisie were no longer together, she was still Zawadi's mom, which meant the world to him.